Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 3 of a 5-part series called Leading Yourself and Others During Uncertain Times. The uncertain times being the interesting economic, geopolitical, supply chain, etc., scenarios that are ahead of us for the next few years, coming off the back of a very challenging pandemic. In the first episode, we talked about understanding the situation. And the second episode, we spoke about understanding the impact of how all of these scenarios are likely to impact you and the people that you are leading, whether you're leading yourself or whether you're leading yourself and a team of people. Today, we are specifically talking about the economy. We are speaking about inflation specifically and how you might be able to deal with that and understand what's going on within your specific scenario. I'm going to talk from personal experience here, and hopefully that will give you some insight into how you might be able to approach understanding the inflation and on the broader sense and how it will impact you, as well as how you'll have conversations with people around it. Let's do it. This podcast is brought to you by Map It Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/Map It Forward to find out how you can become a member today. Okay, so inflation. How are you going to deal with inflation? I have a very specific approach to inflation with my clients. Number one is make sure that the revenue streams that you are using as the main sources of revenue into your business are secure and solid. So strengthen your revenue streams, because inflation is going to impact pretty much everything. Let's take a step back before we explore that further. For those who have heard the word inflation but don't know what it is, a very crude definition or a way of understanding inflation, if we take a look around us, we can see that the price of everything is going up. Everything. And the reason that everything is going up is because of supply and demand economics and its relationship with wages. So if in the last episode we were talking about the supply of coffee, if the supply of fertilizer gets reduced because of what's happening in Ukraine, the limited amount of fertilizer that's left goes to all the coffee producers. So we've got half the amount of fertilizer and the same number of coffee producers. So therefore, all of those coffee producers that want that fertilizer are going to start needing to pay a higher price to make sure that they get access to the fertilizer. So now the coffee that they have decided to produce, they're paying more. It's costing them more to do it. Because it's costing them more to do it, they then have to either ration the amount of coffee that they are producing, or they ration the amount of fertilizer that they're using to produce the same amount of coffee, or they're going to have to make sure that they pass that price on to the end consumer if they can. But for the producers who didn't get access to the fertilizer, their yield will drop. So we have a scenario where half the number of producers are going to absolutely see a reduction in the amount of coffee that's going to be produced compared to last year. And that's all other things being equal, climate change, etc., etc. And the half that did get access to the fertilizer, they at best will produce something similar to the crop that they produced last year. So now what we can clearly see is, again, all things being equal, there is going to be less coffee in the market for consumers to end up consuming. Roasters or green coffee buyers are the ones who are now going to start looking to buy that product. So the fertilizer went up in price because there was less supply. Coffee is now going to go up in price because they had to pay more for the fertilizer and other inputs, and there is a drain on supply. And then we pass that on to our green coffee buyers and roasters who are experiencing an increase in costs of their own. So as you can see, with a commodity like coffee, every time it goes through different hands along the supply chain, we're adding extra and extra and extra with reduced amounts being available to be purchased. This means that the end consumer is going to bear the brunt of all of the accumulated little bits that are added along the supply chain. And what we're starting to see is that business owners are very nervous about how they will talk to their customers about inflation and how they'll talk to staff about inflation. And so when we look at the impact, as we talked about in the last episode, one of the major impacts that that I am personally hearing from people is, I don't know if people will pay what I have to charge in order for me to make money. The other thing that they say is, I don't know if I'll be able to charge enough to pay my staff, which is the other part of the inflation story. So where we end up in a very challenging and destructive scenario is when wages have to go up because employees are seeing that all of their living expenses are going up. So they ask for more wages, and businesses have to sell their product for more to be able to pay their staff wages, which are going up. And because businesses are charging more to pay for wages, wages need to go up again. And then because of the next increase in wages, prices have to go up again. And so what we end up in is this very destructive cycle where small businesses can no longer keep up with the increasing cost of paying wages, and their customers simply can't afford to pay the prices that they have. Now, small businesses are more impacted by this because larger supermarkets and larger businesses have greater access to capital, and they may have a longer runway to be able to work through this inflationary spiral until it resolves itself. I'm not confident that we have the right people in power to fix this situation. I'm also not confident that we know what the fix is to this scenario. And so we're just all going to have to wait. But what's going to be important is that we understand what the situation is. You know what your limits are. You know how you're going to navigate it. I really apologize for my blocked nose. I've had a flu for a few weeks and it doesn't seem to be going away. So I just wanted to apologize. I meant to do that in the first episode of this series. But anyway, the way that we are being impacted by inflation as an industry will present you in your leading strategy with a number of important decisions. Do you work with the businesses in your area that do the same kind of business as you and combine your buying power, as we spoke about in the last episode? Do you do that as a way to protect all of you from what might otherwise be the elimination of some of you out of business? Or do you just decide, I'm going to be in this for myself, I'm going to protect my own stuff, I don't care what happens to anybody else? And folks, let's be real. The challenging times ahead, and always in challenging times, the way that we choose to participate determines our success or our failure. But what success or failure is set by each individual. Surviving this crisis without any relationships left because you managed to fuck everybody over, I'm not sure that that's the best way to go about things. My mother has a saying, and she says, Lee, there's no point having food if your neighbors are all going hungry. And it's a beautiful, it's a Syrian saying. It's something that they say back in my mother's village. But it's something to ponder right now. Because in our industry, we talk a lot about community. And when push comes to shove, I'm not sure that community means the same thing to a lot of people. So it's not about kind of having a communist agenda where everybody should be equal and everyone should have the same thing. That's not what I'm talking about. But some practices that I have seen that have been quite underhanded, that we have to find a way to protect from, is this predatory pricing that seems to happen in challenging times, where you've got people who are a little bit bigger than some of the other players come in and decide to undercut the pricing of all the small businesses in the area. I'm particularly talking about coffee roasters. So a coffee roasting company that's on the up and up, that's perhaps secured a little bit more capital, will come in and decide that they are going to predatorily price their coffee to undercut all the other coffee roasters that are also competing in the market. Now, in an environment like we are in today, for a cafe owner, that seems quite attractive, or a supermarket, that seems quite attractive because the price of everything is going up. Now, one way to hedge against that, if you are experiencing predatory pricing, is perhaps for the coffee roasters to get together and improve their buying power, the smaller coffee roasters to get together to improve their buying power so that they can at least price match that bigger business. Something else that I want to say, going back to what we were talking about, revenue streams. Revenue streams are important because the diversification of having different kinds of revenue streams means that if one part of your business is significantly impacted by one of the 5 things that we spoke about in the first episode of this series, the economy, geopolitics, supply chain logistics, or local politics, you have other revenue streams that will be able to create a buffer until you can recover from whatever way that was impacted, that revenue stream was impacted. If you only have one revenue stream for your business, this is a good time to look at what other revenue streams you have. Now, if you don't have a business, same deal goes for you. If you have one job, and that is a fixed income for you, I would encourage you to use this time to find a way to diversify your revenue streams, whether you become a content creator online and find a way to monetize that long term, because it is long term, or it is you get onto Fiverr or Airtasker or any of these platforms where you can perhaps earn a little bit of extra money for some skills, whether it's editing videos or putting together spreadsheets for people, or just doing odd jobs around the house in your local community. Finding a way to diversify your income is so important in the times that we have coming up. And so this is a way, when we're having these conversations about inflation, when you're leading yourself, have the conversation with yourself about, how do I diversify my revenue and how do I strengthen the revenue streams that I currently have? quick tip there, solve problems. That's the way to strengthen any revenue stream. Make sure that the revenue stream solves problems. But if you are having conversations with people in your team about inflation, it is important for you to suggest to them that you are happy that they're working for you. You are glad that this is a fixed revenue stream for them, but you encourage them to hedge against inflation, protect against inflation by having alternative revenue streams in case your business isn't able to increase their salary. So you're going to do your darndest to work as a team to keep the business alive and keep them employed. But there may come a time where you're not able to continue increasing their salary as they need it. And if they are able to find other ways to improve their earning capacity, that will be incredibly beneficial to them in the meantime as they face the challenging times ahead, and to you as a business, because you're confident in your ability to be able to grow the business and keep it secure without always having to worry about how do I keep increasing wages and keep increasing wages and increasing wages, which is going to be a challenge for everybody. So I know that inflation is top of mind to everyone. I hope this has been helpful in preparing you for how to have these conversations and how to approach preparing your business or your professional life for the challenges that inflation might present. Incidentally, this is the number one thing that everyone we surveyed said was the thing that they were most nervous about in the next 2 to 3 years. And I totally understand that. I myself have been auditing everything that I do, the way that I approach investing in my own business, the revenue streams that we have for Map It Forward, and how we're going to strengthen those revenue streams into the next 3 years, not just the next 6 months, the next 3 years, so that if we can find a way to solve more problems in the industry and find a smaller way of monetizing that rather than the way that we were thinking before, while also keeping our costs down, we should do well enough to just keep up with inflation anyway. So I hope you found this helpful. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day.
Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.